Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Michelangelo Badio here with a very special guest, a great young guitarist, Stratton Marshall.
Great to meet you guys.
Everything good, Austin?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, cool. Can we get this working so we can see the...
Yes.
Great. So we're doing something a little different today. Obviously, I have a special guest, but we're multi-streaming this too. So you're going to see it in high definition on YouTube as well as on Facebook. So, I wanted to start off today. Okay, great. All right, now we can see some of the questions. Okay, before we get into everything, I want to do some shout outs. I see Roxana, Denny, Kevin. So I'm looking down here. We have a screen. Hello, Alexis, Cynthia. Hello. These are just people that are always come online. Also, let's see. Yep, John, Ethan. There's Tanya. I said hello to Alexis. Hello to Denny. There's Brett, Nick, Sue, Masako. Hello. How are you, Kevin? All right. Now, I am using a guitar called the FRX, and it's a 24 fret guitar. So this is part of my signature line, and we have these in stock. We also have 7 strings in stock again, the hybrids, and then you have a guitar too that you've done. Now it's not a sawtooth, but Stratton is a great guitarist, and we have to show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is my Kiesel Theos is how they pronounce it. It's got some koa wood on it. It's an incredible guitar. I got a new guitar coming as well. That should be really cool. It's got scallop frets and stuff. So, Richie Blackmore, Yngwie Malmsteen, a lot of guitar players use scallop frets, and that was kind of the inspiration behind that as well. So,
Great.
it actually has some Holdsworth pickups on the new guitar as well, because I love Alan Holdsworth as well.
Yeah, me too. I didn't get it, we were talking about other guitarists. Speaking of Alan Holdsworth, when I met him, I'd seen him play in concert a bunch of times. When I lived in Chicago, and then when I moved to LA, played the Roxy. It was just incredible. But when we were recording our first album with Nitro, Alan Holdsworth was in the studio. And I tried to get him to talk about guitar. He would not talk about guitar. He talked about imported beer. I'm like, we got on the subject of beer, which I knew nothing about, but he wouldn't talk about guitar. But a little bit of trivia, when we were recording our first album, our drummer used a kit called a Sonar kit. Beautiful German made set, but the shells were too thick, didn't sound good on record. And Alan Holdsworth had a drum set. So we used his drum set when we recorded our first album. And it was really great to meet him and talk to him. But I played him some of the solos that we were doing when I was in Nitro. I just tried to get him to comment on anything in music. I couldn't get him to talk. I couldn't crack the vibe, but what a great guitar player. For the people that have been, tuning in every week, I always talk about, different techniques, but one of the things, Stratton's a great teacher as well, and he, is a young player that comes from this new school of guitar playing, and we were talking a few weeks ago about arpeggios, and specifically 3-string, and you said, well, what about 2? And in my entire life, I never really 2-string arpeggios, but that's less than 3. I just never. Explain a little bit what you were telling me about this.
So the funny thing about the concept behind 2-string arpeggios is, I always thought that to make an intro to sweeping, I wanted to do 3, like Michael said. But the funny thing is, when I learned things like Mr. Crowley, they actually involve things like 2-string arpeggios. So what I ended up doing was I wanted to be able to play efficient arpeggios, but at the time my technique might have not been, at that point where I could have that 3-string kind of technique develop. So what I did was I created exercises, say if we're in A minor, I would do something like this, where I would use all the positions of the A minor, arpeggio. Which that would be kind of like, Jimmy Page. The thing is, I'm playing it like an ascending arpeggio, which the technique would then be down, down, up. So if you do that in all the positions, so this would be 5, 5, 8 right here. that would be down, down, up. That's how I would play it. But
Now, would you pull it off?
No, I actually wouldn't, because for some reason when I did do that sound, I always wanted that 3-note kind of. And then if I played in the the next position, it would be. And then I would do. So what's cool is you can play a 2-string arpeggio, but then you can kind of translate it to the whole entire guitar neck, which if you played it fast, it would have kind of a smooth sound like this. You could even do it up here. What's cool too is you can play it as a descending arpeggio, so you could do.
That's right. Yeah, because I was messing around with it, but I pulled it off instead of go. Now I'm down a half step, so Stratton's tuned in concert. So that's what I was doing. But I
That's
like,
cool.
but it's like I pulled it off. Like you said, it's kind of like that Jimmy Page thing. That's how I was kind of hearing it in my head. But it's really fast just to do it like you did. Yeah, it's hard.
The funny thing about it is the way I do it too is once you get to like that relaxed state of it, sometimes you start to notice within the right hand that the thumb joint starts kind of like wanting to move with it. So if you see that, look at how the thumb starts to. Some of that kind of gets going on, and I think that kind of contributes to a little bit of the speed as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because it's really relaxed, and that's one thing with guitar I've always been interested in is like the most economical movements.
Yeah, no, I used
Like
to
yourself.
Well, I used to say, in a funny way, think lazy, and I didn't mean not practice, but do it the path of least resistance. When it comes to playing. Now let's see. I'm going to see if we have some questions here. One of the things that I found very interesting with and I mentioned this to Stratton earlier today. When you think about where a guitar is today, it is light years away and different from what it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And those techniques are still popular. I remember I had some guy comment on my page, "Oh man, like shred is dead." And I'm thinking, you don't even know. I mean, all the young players are just tearing it up. I mean, it's probably more popular now than ever. But shred doesn't, for me, it doesn't mean not, no feeling, just playing fast. For myself, I just wanted to be as good on guitar as I could be. But I find it very interesting, like, for example, exercises that, remember I said, can you bring some arpeggio shapes? For Dave, I had a student here, Dr. Dave. He's a great guy. I teach him every once in a while because I don't really teach privately. But you brought in these exercises that were just pretty mind-blowing. Like, kind of explain, like, what you would do, like, if, to show people some of, like, these arpeggio shapes or some of your unique ways of, he puts things together in a unique way. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I appreciate that. But the funny thing is about arpeggio, so like we said, I started with the whole 2-string thing, but there's ways actually to play, unique sounding arpeggios while still doing 3-string arpeggios. So if you wanted to do stuff like, would this be like something like a G major 7, I would do something like this where I would do 2 strings, 2 notes on 1 string, so it would be like a 2-1-2 kind of idea. So that would kind of outline the sound of a G major 7 chord. Right. So to make it sound a bit more unique, because if you didn't add that note, it would just be like a straight up B minor arpeggio. Which there's nothing wrong with it, actually. I use that quite a bit too. But what I did was I wanted to create more arpeggios that have more, extended notes out of it. So what I do is I do stuff like this. There's even a pattern that I use that actually allows me to kind of execute this kind of thing. And it's actually a 6-note pattern, so try this. It's really interesting. So the funny thing is this is 6 notes, but where it ends is on the B string 12th fret. So look at it like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. the thing about that is it loops quite nicely, but it also
Yeah,
kind
it
of
does.
sounds really fast. And then once you start playing it with like diminished ideas, I can get that really up to speed quite good. Like. Whoops. But yeah, what's cool about it is I think this is one of those things I can play really, really, really fast and effortlessly at the same time.
Yeah, that. That's what you do, right?
You know what? Yeah, I skip the pull-out part. I don't do that. I go directly. It's really weird.
I'm so used to pulling it off. Yeah, but that's really cool. Like,
Yeah.
So repeat that. Let's.
And also, if you want to add, instead of the 12th fret, it might be a little bit easier to do the 14th fret. So you get a kind of this kind of sound.
So it'd be.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's great, isn't it? Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I like it.
You know what's interesting about that shape too is that could actually be used as a string skipping arpeggio. Instead of playing the B string, what you could do is I actually would start this with an upstroke, but I would play it as like an alternate pick string skipping sequence like this. Which is interesting. I don't know how you would play that, Mike, but I don't know.
Play it again.
So I do an upstroke. And I skip the B string.
Yeah. I might even pull it off too.
I do that as well.
But see, what I like to do. I'd probably start on the top. See, but whoops, I didn't hit the. But what I would probably do is, if I was going to start on the lower string, for just the sequence, I would go.
Right. That makes sense.
For my style, it would be because that way I can kick it into high gear right away. It just falls nicely into this kind of pattern thing. Or start here.
Right, because that's what essentially I'm doing anyway. Me doing the upstroke kind of is compensating for that.
Like.
Oh, you do it like that.
Well, I can. Like, there's two ways to do it. There's alternate. Now, look. So it's kind of an implied, it's kind of weird. But yeah, I love that. That's really cool.
And if you wanted to extend the
That's
shape,
why he's here. He's a really great player. Okay,
if you wanted to extend the shape, then you could take it to the A string and play 10, 14, and then play the same thing. But I actually would still do an upstroke, which Mike might do. But I would just do up, down. Which is really cool to alternate pick, you know what I mean? I also would maybe sometimes do this with, hammer-ons and pull-offs.
Yeah, because there's that arpeggio too,
Oh,
that
yeah.
string skipping.
You could do that.
Yeah, that it's kind of. Yeah, exactly. Like where you have like the minor shift. Yeah, I love those. I love string skipping, whether it's picking, tapping, anything. Now let's see. Okay, never too good to learn something. Yeah, you're right. Somebody said, never too good to. Always a student. That's the motto. Always a student. If you think you know it all, you're a tough luck. Anyway, so continue. Keep talking about it.
Oh yeah, so yeah, that's what I would do. So if I wanted to create a sequence out of that, then I would extend that maybe with, say, a 5-string arpeggio, which a lot of people would play maybe a B minor. But if
Right.
you want to make it a G major 7, you just play the 10 right there.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
gives it a quite more, it just sounds a little bit more maybe melodic.
Yeah.
It has a less of a, minor sound.
No, yeah, because B minor 7th is, you have that B minor, that's G major 7th,
Mm-hmm.
And then the minor 7th would be like it would be a major 9. Like, yeah, it's interesting. Let's see. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about too, I'm gonna just for a second with Sawtooth, just say that the signature guitars are in stock now. So, and I'm gonna be in LA for a couple weeks in July. So, you're going to see me playing a lot of these, and I'm pretty sure we have some shows coming up. I'll know it really soon. I know it's kind of short notice, but everything's opened up in California literally today. And so, it looks like I'm going to be doing some shows in California with the MAB band before I go on tour. Why don't you tell people what you've got coming up? You were telling me about recording an EP and...
Right, so I'm working on an EP at the moment. It's instrumental music, of course.
I'm shocked. Yeah.
And, it has kind of like a neoclassical kind of vibe. It's sort of, the stuff I kind of grew up listening to. Like, I've always been a huge fan of Randy Rhoads, so it's kind of an extension of that kind of sound in a way. But, a little bit more modern sound, a little bit more metal sounding.
Cool.
Maybe a little bit more, like, I'm trying to showcase a little bit more technique, but at the same time, make it musical.
Yeah, good songs. No, that's
songs,
great.
exactly.
What about playing live? Are there any aspirations, or do you have shows booked? Or
Not at the moment. I do definitely want to start doing that. I want to get a band together and, start actually playing the music that I'm writing live. I feel like it's always something I wanted to do. So yeah, that's definitely something I want to get happening.
great. And I can't stress this enough. I've been doing these live streams for well over 15 months now, but I keep, I'm such a fan of guitar, and when you see this young generation play, and the ways you can combine things, guitar is, I can't think of any other instrument that has progressed like a guitar. Where I remember Mike Varney, the guy from Shrapnel Records that signed me and Yngwie and Greg Howe and Paul Gilbert and John Five and Marty Friedman. Basically, if you were on Shrapnel, that you were like in the special forces in the military. And I remember him asking me in the 80s, he said, Yngwie is really big, and every band is, Chris Impellitteri and Gilbert and Tony McAlpine, and all these great guitar players are on the scene. John Sykes and Whitesnake, he was another guy that could really shred it up. And I remember him saying, what new can be done on guitar? It's kind of like, I don't know if he was asking the question or kind of saying to me, we've seen it all. How much faster can you get? And when I was going to school, they said that centuries ago. In the 1700s, in the classic era, Mozart and Haydn, over 10,000 symphonies had been written at that time. And these are like 30 to 45 minutes in length, each one. And I remember, and critics and pundits of the day were saying, everything that can be done in music has been done. And when Mike mentioned that to me, I immediately thought of that and said, who knows? And I can, unless somebody can correct me, and I'm not saying this is the gospel, but, I was thinking about violin, piano, oboe, you name the other instruments. Really, what new sounds have been gotten out of a violin? Yeah, they can make it electric, and they can make it sound more like a guitar than ever, but the guitar, when you see a guitarist tapping cashmere on acoustic, or like the way you put together arpeggios, it's just unlimited, and that's what makes guitar so amazing. We don't really know where it's going to go, but I think that the internet has been really great for guitar, because I was one that first started putting on instructional programs. You were born after my instructional programs were out. It's just a whole different level of seeing things. Now, I was looking, there's not many questions out here. because normally I don't take questions. But I was going to say, like, what are you working on now?
As far as like, what do you mean, like?
Like maybe new techniques.
New techniques?
Yeah.
So right now, at the moment, I'm just working on creating new lines as far as like economy picking exercises. So like I said before, this whole thing. Just, I work sometimes on creating new shapes and exercises to kind of like outline different chords. You know what I mean? I did actually a video a while ago, but it's still something great to like work on for me. Even is kind of changing the shapes, but also changing key centers as well. So I do something like this. So stuff like that, like it's changing keys quite a bit, and I like doing stuff like that where you're constantly in a motion of key changing.
Great.
So stuff
great.
like that, working over changes and stuff.
That's really cool. I was thinking, we didn't plan this out, but it might be kind of cool. Maybe if we did a little jam. Would you be into that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Like if you play a rhythm, just play any rhythm you want that you feel comfortable playing. I'll solo over it. Now I'm down a half step, but it doesn't matter to me. If you play an E, I'll play an F. I don't care. But just play a rhythm. I'll play some leads, and then I'll play that rhythm. We'll just go back and forth.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's go for it. Ready?
All right, let's go. So you want to play in E minor, cool?
E minor, fine. That's F for me, so no big deal. Okay.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, okay, let's see. Sawtooth, Sunning, Great Mead. Okay, yeah, that's Stratton Marshall on guitar. This is so much fun today, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. I want to say a couple things. One, if you know my career, you know that a long time ago I wrote a song called Call to Arms. Call to Arms! Anyway, we are releasing it tomorrow. Vinny Appice on drums, Rudy Sarzo on bass, me on guitar, and Melody from the band Liliac, the young teenager singer that is with the band Liliac, the family band. They endorse Sawtooth, and she's the vocalist on this, and it's a really killer version. So that comes out on the app. It's GoDPS Music Live. And one of the things, too, when you download this app, anything that you get from this guitar, anything that you buy online through that app is an automatic 20% discount, anything. And the app is free. One last thing before I talk to you again. I'm going to be doing 2 tours this year. Now that things have opened up with COVID, I'm going to be going in the USA from September 7th till the end of October. And so we're going to start, we're heading west. And so, I'm going to be playing a lot of places, St. Louis, downstate Illinois, so it's going to be a lot of shows. Then after I'm done in the US at the end of October, I fly to Europe, and I'm going to be on tour from the beginning of November, right around the 7th, I think is the first show, to the 18th of December. So there's a lot going on right now on the tour schedule. I mean, a lot of bands are going out. That's why I'm interested, it'd be cool for us to do a show together,
That'd be seriously awesome.
Yeah, and so let's, why don't you talk a little bit more about, when you were growing up, what were your aspirations? On guitar, what did you see yourself playing like? You've got great technique, you said you're writing songs. What were some of the things that you really worked on as a kid, to get this kind of technique that you have?
That's a great question. So, like I said, in the beginning stages, I was always doing alternate picking, So actually I watched a Paul Gilbert video, and the funny thing is I actually thought it was incorrect, the technique I was using, because when we were talking about 3 notes per string scales, he was saying you should alternate pick them, and I was, at the time, economy picking them. So I thought that was a bit strange that my technique wasn't aligning with what he was talking about. So actually in the beginning I thought I was doing something wrong.
Wow.
And the funny thing is I did get really good at alternate picking. And then the thing about it was I discovered people doing economy picking. I was like, wait, this is how I naturally kind of play. Why should I do alternate picking all the time when I kind of maybe genetics, I naturally just want to do down up down when I do 3 notes per string, or vice versa, up down up if you're doing descending lines.
Yeah.
So I think that I kind of practice economy picking a lot. That was stuff I was working on for a long time. I would say from 2013 to 2017, I was literally just working on recrafting my technique in a way. Because prior to that, I was doing a lot of alternate picking.
Yeah, it's interesting. If anybody's seen, Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger, have you ever seen those movies?
I haven't.
Well, anyway, he's totally ripped, and they called it the Age of Steel, whereas everything was with the sword, but the leader of this cult said the Age of Steel was before. Now it's the age where he could tell somebody to jump off a building and they would jump. Goes, that's power, boy. And it reminds me of just strict alternate picking, the Age of Steel. Before, it's myself included, that everything I did was alternate picking. I just loved the sound of it. And then as I've gotten older, I realized, economy flows a different way. But I find I use that a lot more. It's economical, and there's ways, it simplifies riffs that with alternate picking might take a little, because it's like a violin, you're doing this, bow, 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 back and forth, where economy's more like that, and I'd rather be like this all night than just constantly back and forth, with the pick. So, no, it's really interesting because you have a smooth style, and I think that's a lot to do with economy. Even somebody like Yngwie, he's not a strict alternate picker, and I think that's what gives him that fluidity, that really fluid motion to his playing. But no, it's interesting. One of the things too, we both have YouTube channels and Instagram and all this stuff. But I find that people that help other people, guitar teachers. I mean, guitar again. I can't stress it enough. When you think about what's being done on a guitar today, these are things that were never done before. And just somebody like you, like when I was coming up, the name economy picking wasn't even established yet. I mean, there, and the idea of that he's a shredder didn't exist. That was a media thing in the 1990s. I mean, yeah, we said, yeah, he shredded, but I never remember in the 80s when I came up in the LA school, no one ever said, oh, dude, he was shredding. That just didn't, I think it was a critic's way of criticizing people who could play fast because, again, I defer to my music education. They used to call in the old days, if you were a keyboard player, a pianist, and I said you were a virtuoso, 200 years ago that would be an insult because the technical definition is you're extremely gifted at a technical level. It has nothing to do with feeling. Now we think of virtuoso. The meaning has changed, but back then it just meant you had great technique, and that's all you had. It's just and again, I just look back at that, and if we would have listened to critics who said, "Oh, well, that's just shred." Everybody shreds. Girls shred. I mean, I see it every day on Instagram. You've got some hot girl ripping on guitar, playing, everything from Hotel California to something else, and and they write, I'm shredding it today. It just means being good. But now, if today, like for example, your warm-up regimen, like what would you consider, like if you had because I get that asked a lot, like how do you warm up? What would be Stratton Marshall's way to warm up?
So the way I would warm up, that's a great question, by the way, because when you warm up, I think it's great. We were talking about this earlier. Easing into your warm-ups, don't play as fast as you possibly can when you first start warming up. Of course, you want to play slow and you want to focus on tone, technique, things like this, just to get your fingers, heated up a little bit.
Right.
So my warm-up would be probably something along the lines of, like 3 notes per string scales, and I would probably do something even like this. Maybe if we're in like E, I would do and I would try to kind of maybe loop that. So I would do that slow a couple times. I would go. But the thing is with that, I'm focusing on tone completely because I'm not trying to get that sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for a very smooth sound when I play. So to get locked into that sort of, that feel, you kind of just sort of play it slow, and then after you get the tone you're looking for, things tend to, start speeding up gradually. So I'll do something like this. This is a great exercise, actually. It's just basically an ascending and descending economy picking exercise, 3 notes per string. And then I would end on the E right there.
Now I noticed you hit two notes, like something like
Oh yeah, I do that.
Yeah, I heard 2 notes.
Yeah, I do that sometimes. If you want, you can play the note that would fit in the harmonic minor scale.
No, it's really cool because it fits that 3-note pattern, so it can really, it's great.
So yeah, if you wanted to do that with like the harmonic minor sound, you just add, what would that be, the D sharp? Or D flat? No, E flat, D sharp, E flat, either way. You could do this too. If you wanted to make it sound like melodic minor.
That's cool, yeah.
That sounds pretty cool too. I like doing that kind of stuff. And yeah, and then after that I'll do some stuff with like hybrid picking. So generally I like to improvise in like a melodic minor mode, so I'll do some like stuff like I'll do stuff like that, and I just kind of want to warm up and think of cool things to play. You know,
What about some of the wide interval stuff you were doing?
the wide interval stuff
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I was watching. It was kind of a hybrid picking thing.
oh these kind of things. This would be like a G major thing that we were talking about earlier, like this. I do that kind of stuff all the time.
That's really cool.
I like the way that sounds because you get this. So you could do that in G or C with that same exact shape. So I mean, G major 7 and C major 7. I like that a lot. I do stuff like this. Do stuff like that. If you want to do like a flat 5 arpeggio, then you could do an F sharp in this key. Look at that stretch. That sounds cool too when you could do a minor 7 arpeggio as
Right.
well. And you could do that with a dominant 7. So if we're in like D7, you could do something like.
So now, what is the picking sequence on there? You're doing a pick, and then you're using fingers, right?
Right, so let's just take it back to G major real quick. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a downstroke, hammer on, down, so that's the sweep, and then here's where the hybrid pick happens. So that's your first 4 notes. And then the next 3 notes would be. So this would actually be a great exercise to start with that, going like. So it always follows like sometimes it's a pick or a hammer. I'm not actually exactly sure 100% of the time the way I'm doing it, but I found that this system works because it's using sweeping and hybrid picking at the same time, which is quite cool, I think.
It's really cool. Yes.
And when I descend that though, funny enough, I actually economy pick it. So if I were to do it backwards, so if I want to do something like, I would just use economy picking.
Cool. Okay, now, what do you think? One more jam to end this. Do you want to play a progression, or I can play one, or
Yeah, you can play one.
what's a good key for you? What do you-
Well, you want to do something in A major, F sharp minor,
Oh, we can. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was.
or E major. It's up to you.
I was thinking. I was actually thinking of Crazy Train or something like that.
That'd actually be a good one.
See, no, it's an F sharp.
You do this section here. Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
I'll speed it up a little bit. You want to take the first lead then?
Yeah, I'll take the first lead.
1, 2, 3, 4. was great. It was
Better.
great. Okay, let's do a little recap. One of the things that I wanted to play this FRX is that we just got them in stock again. The hybrids. Every one of my signature guitars has done fantastic, and there a lot of these are in stock. This is in stock. We have my new 7-string in stock, and we have the left-handed version in red, and then we have a black version of the 7-string, and then the hybrids are back in stock again too. We were sold out on those. We have those in. Also, you've got to get this app, Go DPS Music Live. It's free. Download it, 20% off. You can see this, what we're doing today on my YouTube channel, and hopefully when you do a live stream, maybe I can come on yours, and we
Let's
can
do it.
But Stratton's a great guitar player. There's a lot of things to look forward to with him. He's online a lot, big presence on Instagram and more on YouTube. Told you about the US tour, the European tour. We'll have the exact dates soon. Hey, Austin, get in here for a second. This is Austin. Austin is,
Hello.
yep, there he is. He's the one that's been putting all this together. Also, when we tour, he is the one that we tour together. So, people that have been to the meet and greets and all these things, the concerts and the the lessons beforehand, Austin puts it all together. Yep. So, when I was online with Herman Lee, that was Austin in the background. You can't do anything alone. No one does it alone. So, but thanks, Austin. And then one last thing too. Stratton's got a great methodology to the way he plays and teaches. Mine, speedkillsmetalmethod.com. So, is there anything you want to add before we sign off here?
I have a course on basically the stuff that I do. It's just basically tabs to things that I write and post on Instagram. Well, they originally actually are like pieces that are a part of my playing, and then I kind of curate them to be like, things that flow nice. So what I do is I tab these out kind of after the fact, maybe like when it becomes kind of highly requested, and then I add the lessons to my lesson pack. I call it Insta Licks for guitar, because they're like instant licks. You can just stream it and whatnot. So if you want to check out things like that with tabs and stuff, then just go to gumroad.com /Stratton Marshall.
Awesome. Stratton, thank you very much. Austin, thank you. Multi-stream here. We're going to do a lot more things like this, and when I go on tour, we're going to be posting a lot. When I announce the tour dates, I do a lesson before this, before each concert, and it's really informative. One of the excerpts from one of the lessons on Facebook has over 1.3 million views. And we sold out most of them before. The classes are between 10 and 15 people, and we had to actually add room in several of the cities. We just had too many people. And, it can't get too much bigger than that because there's not enough time to go over with everybody what we need to cover. But I'll be talking about that, but it's basically a master class before I do the concert. So it's not just a show where you're going to see a lot of licks and songs, but you get to learn from this too. Anyway, Stratton, thanks again. You rule, man.
Of course.
Wait, it's COVID, so we can elbow bump. So we're being politically correct in these politically correct times. I can't even say it because I don't say politics very much. So anyway, but thank you very much on behalf of Sawtooth Guitars, Chromacast Music Products, Go DPS Music Live. I'm Michelangelo Badio, and also with his. We don't usually say other brand names, but we're good people at Sawtooth. We don't care. You use Kiesel?
I'm Stratton
Cool company,
Marshall. I
man.
play Kiesel guitars.
Yeah, man, why not? As long as people are playing guitar, it's all good with me. I'm Michelangelo Badio. See ya. And Stratton Marshall.